By the time Justin Martyr is killed, it's during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, shortly after the last apostle's death. And as he's standing in front of the civil magistrate or authority, he's questioned in his trial to give an account of his faith. And when you read this in the Acts of the Martyrs, there's a steadiness about him, a clarity about what he thinks and understands from a worldview perspective. And in all of that, a sort of fearlessness in the face even of death. And the authority will say to him, well, what if I told you that we were going to scourge you and behead you? He was like, yeah, I hope you do. I hope to be tortured because I'm so convinced in the rewards and the blessings that God has. So there's this unflappable quality about him. And it's certainly the aim of the Christian life. So Peter says in his letter this morning, may grace and peace be yours in abundance. And Justin Martyr, he just has it. But then he says, through the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord. But that moment, behind Justin Martyr in that moment, is a lot of little victories that led up to it. I think sometimes when we look at the lives of the saints, we sort of admire, like, man, if I had that sheer force of will, or who knows, maybe he was just built different or whatever. But that's not true. That's not true. That is the culmination of a ton of smaller victories along the way. And amazingly, and I love that this is even in the scriptures, Peter actually charts that path. He says, for this very reason, because he wants us to obtain participation in the divine nature and all the rewards of heaven, for this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue. So think of the Christian life. And on a core level, on a foundational level, there's faith. I believe that Jesus Christ is who he says he is, that he can do what he promises to deliver on, and that I could participate in all of that. But it's not enough to simply have that. He says, supplement your faith with virtue. That faith then has to inform my life. I should be looking at my life and saying, does every level of my person reflect this conviction? How could I say I profess these things, but not come to Mass on Sunday, or beat my wife, or not pay my taxes, or ignore the suffering of my neighbor? How could I do that? No. Supplement your faith with virtue. But if any of us are on that quest, that's hard, right? That's very hard. And immediately, one of the first crossroads we hit is, well, what does it mean to be patient in this moment? What does obedience to Christ look like in this situation? And so Peter goes on, supplement your faith with virtue, virtue with knowledge. We will quickly arrive, if we try to exercise virtue, to the truth that we need to know more, beginning with God. I need to know more about who God is. I need to understand how Jesus lived his life and what that says about the way that I'm living mine, so that I can reflect those same virtues in the way that I'm living. Knowledge with self-control. But once I have that knowledge, if I think the spiritual life is built on self-sufficiency, I'm going to land flat on my face. So I have to exercise a certain self-control, which begins with understanding that so much of life is outside of my grasp. And that's going to immediately be met with a kind of suffering. So he says self-control with endurance. It's a discipline to moderate our passions. And so we have to show endurance on a daily level, that we are taking the knowledge, living it in virtue, motivated by the fuel of faith. And endurance is exhausting. So Peter says, and endurance with devotion. So realizing that I can't ride on my own fuel, I find myself on my knees in front of the Blessed Sacrament, asking for God's assistance, Lord, I can't do this alone. And the Lord will give that. And he changes us from the inside out. So Peter says, and devotion with mutual affection. So as our intimacy with Christ grows, as we develop in virtue and endurance and in knowledge, and as our faith then becomes more realized in defining our whole life, there's an outward orientation to it, so that how I love my neighbor is now informed by this entire process. That I'm not busy spiritually navel-gazing, but I realize I'm also a bearer of a mission, and so mutual affection with love. So Justin Martyr, by the time he gets to the civil authority and has to give an account of his faith, he's able to do it because he has self-control, because his faith has matured, because it's endured through various trials of suffering, that he knows exactly what he thinks about all of the topics he's being questioned about, and he's able to respond to the authority with love rather than resentment, anger, fear, or any other emotion that could overwhelm any one of us in the same situation. So that by the time he dies with the peace of Christ, and then reaps a disciple's reward. Folks, all of that is drafted in the second letter of Peter in his first chapter. I really encourage you to go down, it's like 5, 6, and 7, the verses, and to reflect on that in your own life, to see where you are on your own journey, what it is that you need, and then find that as Christ is making it available.